what I've realized, one of the foundations for a good political theology, good theology of sex, good theology of all these other things is covenant theology. I think that's kind of like that's the foundation that all these things spring from. Do you understand the covenant nature of God, the way that He works in the world through covenants? And I don't personally think dispensationalism long term, like there's some outliers, like John MacArthur, praise God for he's done awesome stuff. But I personally would say, as much respect as John MacArthur is worthy of, and I do believe he's worthy of respect, I think he's done some great stuff inconsistently. And I'm grateful for that inconsistency.
Praise God.
But my point is, long term, I don't think that's the theological framework that's going to be able to support these kinds of endeavors. But my point is this: I think one of the reasons why it's hard for me, I don't know about you, but it's hard for me to sell people on you can't just be anti-woke, or you can't just be patriarchal, or you can't just be post-mill, or you can't just have resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. All these are good things, but we need to learn our ABCs. We need to we actually need to learn start with grammar and logic, and then we'll get to some of this rhetoric stuff at the top. But one of the reasons I'm struggling to convince people is because they're looking at the fruit. And so my point is, they're saying, so you're telling me that it's imperative as a foundation to be confessionally, covenantally reformed. Okay, yes. But 75% of the confessionally, covenantally reformed guys were cowards when COVID hit. And they shut down their churches, but you can see the Instagram photos of them at a BLM rally. And then you're telling me these other guys that are anemic theologically, like these Calvary Chapel guys, they kept their churches open and told Caesar to take a hike. So I'm just not seeing it, Joe. I'm not convinced that you need this for this. And part of that's because our own team sucked, like really, really sucked. And it's what do you think about that? What do we do about that as local pastors?
Well, it's crazy, right? Because so you find yourself in the trenches with people you never thought you'd be in the trenches with.
I know, yeah.
And then you find yourself like firing at people that you never thought you would fire at. Like I watched some friends go directions that I just never thought they would go in a million years. I mean, really, the churches that fell apart and some of these guys that really went for the hardcore, you have to do whatever a government agent tells you to do. It was a little bit surprising. And there was also, like you said, good surprises. So the folks that they basically just loved the church, right? They just loved their people and they feared God and they took a strong stand. And you found yourself like at times like with charismatics who are, pretty much Arminians, and you're fighting the same fight. Well, what's interesting, what I see happening is those guys though are what I would tell someone, all right, so listen to the Calvary Chapel guys' argument for why they did it. And what direction, what's the trajectory of their argument? I guarantee it's more covenantal. It's more built around sphere sovereignty. They might just be doing it in their own broken way, but they are moving towards truth that they were forced to. Right. But they just knew like from the heart. See, that's the thing that's so upsetting. It's one thing to fail from ignorance. It's another thing to fail from knowledge. And so these guys that didn't have the knowledge, but they knew enough and they worked from it and they came to the right place. The Reformed guys have no excuse for it. Our confessions lie these sort of things out. The entire Reformation, especially those of us that descend from Puritans here in America, was on religious freedom and being able to worship the way we want to worship when we want to worship, right?
The Black Regiment, and then we've got the Scottish Reformers and John Knox and Protestant resistance theory. Like that's our heritage, and these guys knew that and failed.
And we did. So I think, but what's really fascinating is I've got so many friends turning covenantal, so many friends coming this direction. And I've had to work really hard to think through my language and how I communicate in front of my church, just to make sure they understand these concepts. Like, I don't know, I don't think we're Facebook friends, but my Facebook comments are like the worst dumpster fires at all times. and I'm like hiding, blocking, deleting. Like I don't like to play moderator, so I block a lot. But a lot of people misunderstand things I'm saying because it requires like their reading comprehension's bad, but their theological reading comprehension is like just terrible. And they don't understand what these words mean. They don't understand insider language. They don't understand the allusions, the references that are being made, and they're taking me to say something much more extreme than I am. So it's not good because I've got my critics that are saying, see, he believes this. And then I got people that like agree with my critics, except they think it's good, right? They think my extreme position, which is not nearly as extreme as they think it is. And it's because they have not been discipled. I mean, here's the indictment on the American church and on the American pastors is that it's one of two things, and sometimes both. We don't know, or we didn't follow what we knew, or our people didn't know, right? And so people have not been discipled in America. Me and my associate pastor were talking about how mind-blowing it is and how little Christians know. And what they do know is this very surface level. They've watched a couple YouTube streams. They've read some Wikipedia articles. They're very good at kind of repeating factoids or whatever, but they haven't actually read the books. They haven't had to write papers or study it or think about it or really have intense discipleship by anyone. So they can't really defend their positions when under fire. And they just they fall back to, inflammatory rhetoric or whatever, or they just shrink up and quit. And so that we're having to rethink how to even disciple people. There's like the whole knowledge of Christianity is being wiped away from our culture. And it's because we've had pastors that weren't bold enough to speak the truth, didn't have enough time to disciple people. And when things went crazy, it fell apart because of them. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. So we have to find guys that love the truth and love people and have communication skills to, it's like we're teaching people who should know, like my kids, let's take my kids. My kids all have to memorize the shorter catechism. So, all 107 questions, whatever it is. So they've been taught first the OPCs, children's catechism, since they're like two or three. We started, who made you? God. What else did he make? All things. Why did he make you? For his glory. Right. So all our kids will have to learn that. And then we transition them over to the shorter catechism. My kids know more theology by the time they're 10 than almost all Americans do. And that's not because I'm an awesome dad. That's because that's how sad it is right now.
Right.
And so how do we bring confessionalism back to people in a way that's accessible and still engages culture? Those are the three things I'm looking for is confessionalism, right? Doctrinal standards. So a confession is simply a summary of biblical doctrine that we've agreed upon. Why I like the Westminster 69 would follow this is Westminster was Presbyterians, Congregationalists, and Anglicans came together and were able to put together a consensus document on these main things. That wasn't the full flavor of all those guys, but that was the flavor they could agree to.
Right.
And I feel like you get that many people of those different persuasions in one room, they come up with that doctrine. One that's really funny. I heard George Gillespie, though, who, when he opened his prayer as they're about to write the definition of God, he actually prayed for the definition of God. What is God? He's a spirit, yada, yada, yada. And so there's like, that's it.
Right.
But these guys are uncommon men. So helping people see the value of these really tried and tested summary documents, consensus statements, and how it relates to their life, that they're not dusty, but they're good. I mean, when I first read the Westminster, I was blown away by how full of life it was. I thought it was going to be a very dry document. It's very devotional. It moves you. Then to communicate this in a way that's accessible to folks that like know something that's wrong, they've been awakened, but they don't have the background. And then to do that also where it motivates them to build holy culture, right? To be involved. And that I think is really what we have to do. And that's a high order right now. Where do we find these men that can do that?
Houston, we have a problem. I repeat, we have a problem. Our conference is about to sell out. I mean, about to sell out. We probably have about 75 to 100 seats left. Our venue holds about 525 to 550 seats, and we currently have 450 people who are registered for this conference. The excitement is tangible. A lot of people registered because they wanted to hit the early bird rate. We're now at our normal rate, $130 for an adult, $50 for a kid who's 11 to 17 years old, and kids 10 and under get in free. You can bring the whole family, but the problem is not that we're going to raise the rate again. The problem is we're going to run out of tickets, and we're going to run out pretty fast. Again, we've got about 100 seats or less. 450 people 6 months out are already registered for this conference. We don't want you to miss it. So to ensure that you get to make it to this conference, you need to register not a month from now, not a week from now, not tomorrow, but today. You want to be there for the Theonomy and Postmillennialism Conference, May 5th, 6th, and 7th, with James White, Joe Boot, Gary DeMar, Dale Partridge, and yours truly, Joel Webbon. Go to rightresponseconference.com. Again, that's rightresponseconference.com. It will sell out very soon.